Welcome back. I am so incredibly excited for this episode of the It Starts With You podcast. We have on the podcast today Jillian Dean. Jillian, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having
Oh
me.
my goodness. Oh, I already know that we're gonna have so many things. I just want to dive into your brain and all of the expertise that you have. But first, I'm gonna give everyone a little bit of an intro into who you are and what you do so that we can dive in. So first of all, I met Jillian actually at a conference, and she was one of the speakers on a panel, and that is actually what really drew me in, is what she was talking about is what she's going to share with you today. And it was also just the way you sort of carried yourself, and you sort of have this like elegance and eloquence to when you speak,
Oh,
and what
thank
you're
you.
talking about. Oh my goodness, you're so welcome. And what you talk about is so important, and I think it's so underlooked with a lot of, high performers, people in leadership roles, people that run businesses. And so I'm so excited for us to be able to dive into this. So a little bit more about Jillian. Jillian was born and raised in a small town in Nova Scotia, which I actually just learned today when you shared that with me. She was a very intuitive kid and could sense even the slightest change in the energy of those around her, which you're around here, we've talked about energy before in regards to energy leadership. Her intuition, coupled with her thirst for anatomy knowledge, really made understanding and listening to the body second nature. As a young healer, her first instinct was to choose a career in healthcare. And so she dove into the world of medical imaging. And after 7 years at the Whitehorse General Hospital, really wanted to get more hands-on and more of a holistic approach to healing. And why so many people, I get so fascinated by this, why so many people have undiagnosed, unexplained, and therefore untreated pain, which really led her to osteopathy. Osteopathy is not only a whole body approach to healing, but a whole life approach. And so she can really tense or notice why people have body tension and pain that can be caused by stress, unexpressed emotions, or trauma from the past. And she integrates these osteopathic practices with Chinese medicine, energetic healing, and her own intuition. So fascinating. So many things that I don't think most people know about. I've talked about on the podcast my journey with Lyme's disease and mold toxicity, and my husband's cancer, and how that really got me into this world of more natural and holistic. And that's really what drew me into what you do, Jillian. So thank you again for being on. And with that intro and all the amazing things you do, can you just share with us a little bit more about who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you had mentioned, I was born and raised in Nova Scotia. I've kind of lived all over Canada, though. So, born and raised in Nova Scotia, and then I went to university in New Brunswick, just the next province over. And then once I graduated university, I took a Bachelor of Health Science, and then I got a diploma in radiography. That's how I got into being an X-ray tech. Then I got a job in the Yukon, which is a territory in northern Canada up by Alaska. And I lived there for 7 years and worked at the hospital there. And again, as you mentioned, just seeing people in pain every day. Like, that's my job, is to, like, you don't go to the hospital if you're not sick or not in pain. So seeing people in pain every day, and honestly, it felt like 90% of the x-rays just came back normal. It didn't show anything. I was just like, well, there's got to be something going on with these people. They're not just here for fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I got a little frustrated just with the whole system. And I just felt like this is not where I am meant to be. And I looked more into more, as you said, a hands-on and holistic approach, and that's what led me to osteopathy, because osteopathy really looks at the whole body, all of the different systems and the interconnectivity of it all, but also the emotional representation of the different tissues in the different areas of the body, and how holding on to emotions can often create tension in those areas. And having some experience in that area myself, I just lit up when I started doing research into this field. So yeah, I sold my house up there. I sold pretty much everything that I owned except for what I could fit into my car at the time, and moved to Alberta, where I live now. Went back to school, completely changed my career, and now I have my own practice.
Oh my god. First of all, I'm so glad you said the name. I have been saying the name of this wrong ever since I met you. Jillian, I feel like I've even said it before. So how do you actually say it? It's osteopathy?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Now I'm going to have to like, if
I mean, I feel like it's like potato, potato, tomato, tomato kind of situation. Like, I feel like it still means the same thing. It's not like you're completely off
saying
base.
like the wrong, I'm going to have to like phonetically sound it out because otherwise, I'm probably going to say it wrong a couple times because now I've been saying it wrong. Osteopathy, osteopathy. Okay, but that is all fascinating. What really, really stuck out to me, what you just said, and again, it's one of those things that really stood out the first time I hear you talk, was around seeing people in pain and being told that everything's fine.
Yeah. How many
Everything's
people go to the hospital all the
normal.
time and they're told that it's just in their heads, or maybe it's anxiety, you know? And that,
I get chills. I get goosebumps.
yeah.
Just last night, I couldn't fall asleep, and I did this entire note into my phone about this whole rant about how I've had it. And one of the things that what triggered it was around this people being made to feel like their symptoms weren't real and that everything was normal. And because that was my story for years, every time I went, and I actually had an x-ray, people, or an MRIs and all these things, and we thought I had disc issues and all of that, and it's like, nope, everything's fine. But it was lower back pain, which I know you and I have dove into before, and we will do more in the future because I know that there has more meaning. So I love that you took this sort of intuition that there was more going on. What gave you, I guess, the courage, the gumption to go from, I think there's more to this, like, okay, I actually have to do something about this and help people?
Well, I mean, a lot of it started with my own healing journey, to be perfectly honest. So I just grew up with this mentality that I don't know where it came from, but it just this idea that, okay, like I need to have a plan and I need to go to university so that I can get a job right away. Like I need to make sure that I take something in school that I can get a job right away. And then I'm going to pay off all of my student loans, and then I'm going to get a job, and then I'm going to get married, and then I'm going to have kids, and obviously live in the same hometown that I grew up in, and like just this idea about exactly how life was supposed to work. And I think I made more logical decisions in those earlier years rather than making decisions that were necessarily right for me. And yeah, if there's anybody out there that works in a hospital, they probably know that the culture around working in a hospital is very competitive. It's very just work. Like there's very little self-care that goes into people who work at a hospital. And that seems like an oxymoron in and of itself. The people that are supposed to help everybody else, and they're not able to take care of themselves. But yeah, I definitely struggled with my own health issues at the time, and started seeing different like energy practitioners and healers of all kinds of different sorts, Reiki, and I had a really fantastic massage therapist at the time that incorporated energy work into her work as well, and emotional healing, emotional release. And it just felt so good, and I felt amazing afterwards every time. And that sort of brought me to like, oh, there's something to this. But yeah, it really came to a head when I actually started having panic attacks in my car before going in for my shifts, because it was like that crushing feeling of like, I don't belong here. This is not the right path for me. Yeah, and so that was really the biggest push, was me making myself sick, to make a really big change in my life. And then when I started exploring, like, okay, clearly I can't do this for the rest of my life because I'm going to put myself in the hospital. That's when I started researching different fields of like, okay, well, if this isn't the place for me, then what is? And that led me to osteopathy.
Oh my goodness. And it's so I recently shared on an episode that I had my first panic attack. I've always had like a little bit of anxiety and really heightened the last few years with health issues, but
Mm-hmm.
just recently I had my very first one, which largely came on from being surrounded by a whole bunch of ticks up north, which is very
Oh,
triggering for me since I have
yeah.
Lyme's. And so I had my first one and I never experienced it. And I've worked with clients who have talked about it and, you know, corporate clients who are in high level and high stress roles who have talked about anxiety or panic attacks. And I have other clients who have had them and are out and trying to get into more speaking to help other people with it. But I had never personally experienced one. And so it's so interesting to not only have that lens, but then how you took that as your sign. That's oftentimes for people the sign. Like, okay, this was the catalyst where I realized that I can no longer keep operating the way that I am because of this thing.
Yeah.
So when you work with people now, what is it? First, tell us a little bit about somebody comes to you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I have two questions from this. So I'm going to start with the first one. What does somebody typically come to you and say? Is there a common sort of theme or commonalities among people that are coming to you for things?
Yeah, I would say the most common thing that I hear is I've tried everything. I've been to everyone. I've been to the doctor, I've taken the medication, I've been to physio, I've been to massage, I've been to chiro, and nothing helps. And whether, like I said in my bio, whether it's chronic pain or an unexplained illness, like I have all these symptoms, but no one can figure out what it is. I think is the most common explanation when I see people for the first time, because oftentimes a lot of the more common modalities that people see, so like your physio, your chiro, your massage, like almost everyone has been to one or all three of those. If those ones don't work, then there's something deeper going on. As in, like, let's say you're having pain in your shoulder, and you go to a physio. Well, they're gonna work on your shoulder and all of the tissues around your shoulder, maybe into your chest, maybe into your neck, but in the general vicinity of your shoulder. And if that doesn't create long-standing results, then and I don't want to make a blanket statement about all physios out there, but for the majority of the time, the people that I have seen who have been to all these modalities, it's just like, no, they worked on this nonstop and it gets a little bit better, but then it always goes back, or it only gets better for like a day, and then I'm just right back where I started. And in my experience, there's so many different connections, from like what we talked about, the emotional connections and the unresolved trauma connections, but also like if you like fascial lines and nerve connections and organ connections and connective tissue and vascular connections, and then just like functional connections, like the obviously the stomach and the small intestine, they work together. So there's going to be a connection there. If one of them isn't working well, then it's probably going to make the other one lag. So stuff like that is, so going back to the shoulder example, your fascial lines actually cross. So your left shoulder would be connected to your right hip. So sometimes if you're like, oh, I have this shoulder pain, like I didn't have an injury, it just kind of all of a sudden happened. Maybe I slept wrong. That's another one that I hear all the time. I slept wrong.
Yeah.
Sleeping is not a contact sport. You should not injure yourself. You're injuring yourself.
I tend to get injured a lot while sleeping, yeah.
If you're injuring yourself while sleeping, then there may be something else going on. You're holding tension somewhere that you shouldn't be while you're sleeping. But yeah, the fascial lines cross. So sometimes left shoulder pain could be connected to right hip imbalances. So because your body, everything is connected on every different level. So if there's an imbalance and you're walking around on an imbalanced pelvis, then it's going to kind of work its way up as your body tries to just compensate and develop all this these domino affecting on the tissues until you don't have any more flexibility to give.
And I think that's something that's so interesting. And again, I can just so relate. I've seen them all. You know, you go to physical therapy for your knees and they work on your knees and maybe those get better, but then something else hurts and it's like, wait, why is this moving? So I love that what you talk about is that I think we've lost, I mean, these are old, this is what I think is interesting is the more that I've dove into this, and I think there's more and more people getting around to this, and I hear people talk about like all this woo woo stuff or this new stuff. It's like this is all based in ancient
Yeah, so
medicine and research. I know we were talking about this before we hopped on the call as people who maybe this is really new for them because this is very outside of anything they've thought of or heard of. Is it's based in research, it's based in science, and it's also not new. It's actually very old
yeah, it's
that
been around for
people are.
hundreds of years.
Yeah, and I think we've gotten so as a society that is just focused on achievements and achievements and achievements and doing and working, and we've gotten so disconnected from our body
Yeah.
and so disconnected from what really matters. And that's why we see the rates, right, of, anxiety and depression and just, health issues and hospital, like all of that. I mean, I'm no expert in that, but that's why we see those things going up because we've gotten so disconnected. So your approach is a whole body approach. So when somebody
Yeah.
comes to you, so those are some of the common things that you hear. What is it that you are doing? Like, I know this is one of the things I had asked you is like, what is it that you're doing to help them?
Yeah, so it's exactly what you said, where like disassociation and that disconnect between the mind and the body is so prevalent these days. Like most people just live in their heads and they try to predict all these different outcomes. And that's what leads to anxiety because, I mean, like, what are the actual chances that you can predict the outcome of something? It's usually pretty low. So you create all this anxiety inside yourself trying to think of every different possible outcome, and then in preparation for every different possible outcome, okay, if this happens then I'm going to do this, but if this happens then I'm going to do this, and you just start spinning your wheels inside your head, and you forget to actually connect in with your body to figure out, okay, does this situation even feel right for me? Do I feel unsafe? Do I yeah, like the body knows so much more than what our conscious mind knows. And if we're just taught to listen a little bit better, then we have so much more information than we think we do. So when someone comes in and says, okay, this is where this hurts, or these are the symptoms that I'm struggling with, basically what I do is more of a dialogue between myself and the person's body instead of a dialogue between myself and their conscious mind, because like I said, the conscious mind doesn't know everything, where the body, right down to the cellular level, the body remembers everything that's ever happened to you. In fact,
Crazy.
in embryology, that as you're developing as a cluster of cells, the cells actually rock together, and then they separate, and then that whole cluster starts to rock together, and then eventually that cluster of cells becomes an organ, and then it splits, and then another cluster of cells becomes another organ, and then it becomes you. But because they were rocking together as a cluster of cells, all of the different organs actually have an inherent rhythm and movement that they just kind of rock very nice and smooth and slowly internally. Not something that you would ever be able to actually feel yourself, but just something that just goes back to embryology. And if your cells can remember right back to when you were just a cluster of cells, it can of course remember any amount of childhood trauma or all these different experiences that you've been through. So yeah, so it's more of a dialogue between myself and my client's body. And I can feel where they have the highest amount of restriction in their body, whereabouts. So is it in their left upper quadrant, right lower quadrant? Is it higher towards their head or more towards their feet? Is it more posterior or more anterior? And from that, and this is where my university degrees and my 7 years in the hospital come in handy. I can use my anatomy knowledge to figure out, okay, well, what tissues are in those areas, and what could that possibly be connected to. You can also feel a bit of a tethering. So I like to use the analogy of like if you and I were on opposite sides of a room and we're both holding an elastic band. If you have your eyes closed and I pull on the end of the elastic band, you'll still be able to tell if I all of a sudden switch and pull on the center of the elastic band, right? Because it's a different feel. There's different amounts of tension. Or if I move the elastic band to the left or to the right. And that's how I explain to people what I feel. So if I hold your feet, that's basically one end of the elastic band, and the restriction, or where the tissues are tight, that's the other end of the elastic band. And then I go there and I can kind of work on those tissues individually.
This is just so and when you talk about like the body remembers, it's so true, and it's something that I honestly never thought about until I had to, really.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about that too, and when I'm working with, now obviously I don't work with clients in this regard at all, but when I'm working with executives and business owners and entrepreneurs, and we're working on their leadership and their speaking and their performance, like the commonality that I see with a lot of my clients is they have this high level of expectation for themselves and this high level of achievement. Like just how I am and just how I was, like you want to achieve and you want to do more. And with that tends to come a lot more tension in your body, and you get a lot more in your head because of that. And so when we talk about this, I just see how beneficial this could be for so many people who only focus on strategy. Like they have a result that they want in their life and they're only focused on this external strategy, that we forget ourselves. And then usually what happens is we find ourselves sick, injured, burnt out, because we neglected ourselves for so long.
Yeah.
So what would you say to somebody who might be listening and is going like, okay, this is the first time I'm ever hearing about anything like this, but this sounds really interesting, and this kind of sounds like me that has gone to all these doctors, or I'm feeling burnt out. What would be like a first step that somebody could take, I guess, to even get more in tune with their body and get out of their mind a little bit, I guess?
Yeah. So I think the first step, and like you mentioned, we put so much pressure on ourselves, particularly as people in leadership roles, people in high achieving corporate roles. And I think the most important question to ask yourself is where is that pressure coming from? Is that something from an external source? Like maybe you can remember, like, and now we're getting into kind of the psychology behind why the body acts the way that it does, but like maybe in your childhood you saw one parent work really hard for a certain reason, or the type of language that was used in your household. Because from a child's perspective, perception is everything. So if you're a small child and you see your parents talking a certain way or acting a certain way, then that creates your perception basically of the world. So it's like, oh, okay, this is how my mom acts, so this is how I'm supposed to act. This is what's expected of them, so this is what's expected of me. And you may not even be consciously aware of that, but you carry these deep-rooted beliefs through into your adulthood. And it's not in the forefront of our minds, but to start paying attention to that sort of internal dialogue of like, no, this has to be done this way, or else people will think I'm stupid, or else people will think I'm lazy, or else people will think I'm a worthless human being. When you can actually start to notice those internal thoughts and that dialogue that's just kind of constantly running in the background, that's when you can take more of an active role into changing that. But yeah, asking where the pressure is coming from, because it's probably more coming from those deep internal beliefs rather than from anything external to yourself. But sometimes that feeling of a need to prove yourself, or to make a parent proud or something like that, something external to yourself, it can be very overwhelming or very kind of all-consuming. And that's where a lot of burnout comes from, because when you have this external goal, whether it's like a job title or or a certain dollar amount or whatever it is, where it's something other than just fulfillment in general, then it's almost like if you don't do it all yourself, then it's not worth it, or you don't deserve it, or there's so many different layers to those belief patterns, but you put so much pressure on yourself to do all these things, and it's so difficult to recognize when you need a break, when you're in those types of thought patterns, when you're completely engulfed in that. And that is just a recipe for burnout when you do it that way. So like I said, first I would try to listen, try to hear that internal dialogue, and where is this coming from? Why do I believe that this is necessary? Why do I believe that these are the steps that I have to take? Why do I want this title, this position, this salary? Where does this actually come from? Because if it doesn't come from like that source of fulfillment, then it will literally just lead to, okay, well, I got that job, but now I want the next promotion. Now, this promotion didn't really feel quite as fulfilling or successful as I thought it was going to, so maybe the next one will, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and that just leads to the whole I'll be happy when mentality, and you're never actually happy. And like I said, you end up with burnout and potentially sick or injured or worse.
It's that word pressure too. Pressure is like such a big word that and it's usually self-inflicted pressure that we put on ourselves, and it's just so in line with what I've talked about before, is people are constantly chasing these external validations, and when I get that next promotion, when I get that next big gig, when I get that next dollar amount, but when it's driven from this external validation of somebody else or something else, we never feel that full fulfillment. And I think this is the miss, is people might consciously start to go, okay, maybe that wasn't it, or maybe I need to change my mindset. But I think the thing that we're now seeing more and more in the miss is that people aren't realizing how it's showing up in their body. Like, oh, I'm having stomach issues, or I'm having headaches, or and we're like, we only look to, sleep, or maybe sometimes people look to their food, or, something like that, but they aren't even looking at like, oh, maybe it's because like all of this other stuff that is off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, what's the most common area where people feel pain and tension? I would say it's usually in like the neck and shoulders, particularly for like entrepreneurs or people in leadership roles. And energetically and emotionally, the back of the neck and the top of the shoulders represents weight of the world on your shoulders. So like it all, when you really see how it all fits together, it's like, oh, it just completely lines up. And I actually have a course that's going to be coming out in the beginning of September, and it's called Hustle and Hurt to Healthy and Happy. And I talk about
this sounds amazing.
How like the psychology behind it, like those deep-rooted childhood beliefs, and how you saw how your parents acted, how you saw how your parents talked, and how that can possibly be contributing to your belief systems about yourself, about the world, about those around you today in your adulthood, and how you approach different situations, and then how that affects your body and your health and how you achieve in life.
That's I'm so excited. We'll make sure
you achievement in your life.
How you view achievement. Yeah, that's so true. How you view achievement. So, okay, Jillian, if you could shake people, and you've kind of started to, but if you could shake people and tell them one thing, what would that thing be?
It would be just listen to your body. Just listen. Ooh. Because the messages are always there. And I think I told you a quote that's from there's a brilliant woman named Barbara Brennan. And I'm just going to bring up the quote because I'm going to.
Yeah, share it with
If I
us.
don't, can you still see me?
I can. Yep.
Okay. So the quote is the simplest guidance comes every day and in many ways, in the form of discomfort. Any discomfort anywhere in your body or in your life is a direct message to you about how you are out of alignment with your true self.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
I love that quote.
yeah. And I think that well, everybody has that age where like, oh, I hit 40 and my whole body just broke down, like just one thing after another. And my one of my most frustrating thing is when people are just like, I just think it's old age. I'm
Hmm.
just like, no, no, it's not. It's not old age. Your body is trying to tell you something. You are not an old car that's breaking down. That's not how things work. Yes, naturally, your body does lose collagen. It loses flexibility as you age. That's natural. But as you age, you've just naturally also experienced more things and created more stress in your life and more restriction. You've fallen down more times just purely because of time, and so it's about the scales, right? When the collagen decreases, but the stress on the tissue increases, all of a sudden you reach a tipping point where pain results. And if you keep going in that direction, then more and more pain is going to result. But if you can listen to your body and actually address the messages that it's trying to tell you, then you can actually balance out those scales and live with just as much vitality
Hmm.
at any
I
age.
love that you say that too. Like, we don't need to just accept mediocre. We don't need to accept pain. We don't need to just accept it. Like, oh, that's just part of life. So I have two more questions then for you based on what you just shared. So the first, I know one of the first things you said people can do is to just tune in. And I love that too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, listen to your body, tune in to if you feel that pressure, like, where is that coming from?
Yeah.
If they start to do that,
Mm-hmm.
like, what is like an action that they can take then? I've heard, breath work or
Yeah.
movement, or is there like some type of thing that they're like, okay, I'm noticing I have this tension. Now what do I do about it? Like, what would be one of those kind of entry level steps they could take?
Yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of the times what I've seen is sometimes when you start noticing the tension, emotions will start to bubble to the surface, but then people don't know what to do with these emotions because it's just like, I don't know what this is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where the disassociation comes in. Like, if you're living completely in your head and you have no idea what's going on in your body, you're probably holding on to a lot of emotions that could be coming from years and years ago. And it's not necessarily something that you're currently consciously feeling, but it's still in your body, stored in your cells. So I think, yes, become aware of where you're feeling the tension or become aware of that internal dialogue. But then also, people get overwhelmed by, okay, what is this emotion that I'm feeling? And they try to define it. They try to understand it because we're very logical beings that way. We feel like if I could just understand it, then I won't feel this way anymore. I'll feel like I have more control over the situation. Um, that's not true. That's not
Darn, we want
emotions
control.
are not logical, and they don't care that you want control. But I have found it a lot easier to not try to define it. So if you're feeling an emotion, don't try to say like, okay, what am I feeling? Where is this coming from? Am I sad? What am I sad about? When did that happen? What would make me feel better? Um, that just leads to intellectualizing your emotions. And then that's kind of the opposite of actually feeling it. We all heard the term, you got to feel it to heal it.
Hmm.
But what's complicated is that oftentimes you will feel multiple emotions at the same time. There's no clean edges. It's not like, okay, this is anger and this is fear and this is sadness. It's just all kind of jumbled in there together. So I would say focus more on, okay, I'm feeling an emotion bubble to the surface. Where in my body do I feel a sensation? Does it feel like I've been punched in the gut? Does it feel like there's a lump in my throat? Does it feel like lots of tension and pressure in my chest, or like a deep aching in my pelvis kind of thing, you know? Like, there's all kinds of different sensations that could come up and in anywhere in your body. But then try to focus on the area where you feel the sensation. What does it feel like? Can you associate a color with it, or a shape, or just to really try to bring all of your awareness to that area, and whatever comes up and comes out of your body, whether it's a scream or a cry or whatever it is, maybe you need to write a really angry letter to your mother or something like that, and that's what comes out of you. That allow it to come out, allow it to be exactly what it is without judgment. That's where we get really hung up, is on the judgment piece of like, what this happened like 10 years ago, why am I still feeling like this? I should be over it by now. The shoulds are killers. But yes, doing so, focusing on that internal dialogue, allowing your emotions to be exactly what they are. Don't focus on what the emotion is, but rather where you feel it in your body and what type of sensation it's associated with. And then you can associate those things with the journaling exercises, with the shaking, the jumping, the hip rolling, the breath work. All of that is really, really important, because you need to get it out of your body, right? If you think about the laws of physics, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It only changes form. So you need to transfer that energy, whether you need to punch a pillow or break a plate or scribble really hard on a pad of paper, or write that letter, or journal, or shake, or yell and scream, or whatever it is that feels really good to your body. It needs to come from inside, and it needs to be transferred into something external.
My goodness, I'm like I want everybody who's listening to go back and rewind and listen to all of that again, because you just shared so many amazing things. And a couple highlights I want to say. So the process you kind of pointed out was like, first, listen to that dialogue. Where is it coming from? But then what I love is that, you know, something that I don't hear people talk about as much, and that, or I almost hear the opposite, is like, dig into, like you were saying, like, don't sit there and try and dig into all of it, but just feel it. And I think that's like the action people have, is just, you need to feel it. You need to like let yourself actually feel it and give yourself that permission to feel it. And then it needs to get released. And it's the same thing when I talk to people about energy for thoughts. I don't necessarily talk to people about their body as much, but when I do energy leadership, which is one of the assessments I give to my clients, which we talk about energy in how you show up in your life when you're under stress. And we talk about the same thing, is like, energy cannot be, we can't just like be like, okay, I don't want to feel that way or think that. It's just, I'm going to destroy it. I'm going to have it go away. Like, all we can do is learn how to shift it and reframe it. And so it's the same thing with our body. So thank you for sharing that. And that's, everybody, that's your takeaway of, if you're feeling something, don't just brush it off. Or if you're feeling pain somewhere, don't just like write it off. Maybe you need to sit with it and figure out, what do I need to do with this?
Yeah, because if you try to brush it, it's not going anywhere.
It's just gonna keep getting bigger, right?
Yeah.
Which I always tell people too, we try and bury it down, like we try and shove it down, like, okay, it's fine, it'll be fine, until at some point it comes exploding out in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. The other day on my Instagram, I posted a quote from Freud, and he actually said that emotions don't go anywhere. When they're buried, they just come forth in uglier ways. They're not going anywhere if they're inside of you. And when you think about when you're feeling an emotion, you feel like you're almost vibrating. Like, that's energy. That's all of this energy. That's what you're bottling up. And when you think about bottling that energy inside your body, of course it's going to wreak havoc on your connective tissues and on your organs, because it's just all stuck inside, bouncing around and creating scar tissue and restrictions where there needs to be movement and flow for things to work properly.
And I love that you said that too, because, you know, people who don't think, like, energy is a real thing, everybody, it's science, it's a real thing. And if we Yeah, it's like if we understand this, then we can know that there's like something we can do about it. So I feel like, Jillian, that we could keep talking and diving into so many things, but two things let's wrap up with. So first of all, I always end every episode with this question, which is the name of the podcast is It Starts With You. And this might be related to something you said earlier, but in like one sentence, what does It Starts With You mean to you?
Well, it means that you have all of the control. If you are willing to take, particularly from a health standpoint, if you're willing to take responsibility for your own health and have health sovereignty, then you have all of the control because it's your body. You know you best.
Oh, I love that. That's like the mic. You know you best.
Mm-hmm.
You know you best. If something's off, something is off. Like, trust yourself.
Trust it.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. So I know that people are going to want to find you and tune in. And I feel like we're going to have to do like a part 2 where I'm going to have to bring you on and get more of your expertise at some point. So
I would love to.
share with us more about, remind us again of the course and what you've got going on and how people can find you.
Yeah, so the course's name is From Hustle and Hurt to Healthy and Happy. It's going to be released on September 1st. And that's going to be, it's broken down into 5 different lessons, all about how hustle and the psychology behind the pressures that we put on ourselves, where it comes from, those deep-rooted beliefs, and how that affects our physical health. I also will have, I haven't completed it yet, but I'm doing a free masterclass that's just sort of like very entry-level stuff, just kind of like what we were talking about, okay, let's pay attention to our bodies. How do we get out of that disassociation mode where we live completely in our heads and get more into our bodies? And what does that mean? Because I had a client the other day who, she came in here and she's brand new on her healing journey, and she looked at me and she said, "You need to talk to me as if I was a baby." And I was like, okay, this is the person that this is who I need to speak to, because
like right from the foundation, yeah.
Exactly. Because sometimes when you dive right into it, it can be overwhelming. So that's another big message for people out there, that like it's overwhelming for everyone when you dive full on head first into it. So just take it one step at a time. Yeah. And then I'm on Instagram and TikTok. I'm currently in the process of changing my name. So right now on both Instagram and TikTok, it is JD Manual Osteopath. But I am changing my name. I just got married, so it will be changed to JillianInglis.DOMP.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that we drop all of that in the show notes as well, the link to the course and all of the things you have going on where people can find you so that people can connect with you. So thank you so much for coming on and for sharing all of your wisdom and taking us through all of the things that we can do better so that we can live more fulfilled and happy and joyful lives. And thank you all for listening. If you loved this episode, make sure you reach out to myself, to Jillian. Let us know that you listened. Leave a rating and review for us. This helps us get the message out to more people. And we will see you next time.